Welcome back. A campaign by the New York City Democratic Socialists of America calls for public ownership of the New York power grid. Public Power NYC aims to make energy more affordable and comes in response to increased price hikes and several blackouts caused by the city's main energy supplier, Con Edison. Joining us now to discuss is Adolfo Abreu, candidate for City Council District 14. Welcome, Adolfo. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for the invitation and to have the opportunity to have a conversation on a real critical issue that Bronxites are facing.
Absolutely. Thank you. So to start, let's just get right into it. Can you tell us about Public Power NYC and the coalition's values?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's about building public power and expanding the New York Power Authority to build a utility scale renewable energy system here in New York State. And right now, we have several private utility companies that are not accountable to us as a people. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of folks in our communities that have experienced high rates in terms of their Con Edison bill, blackouts in their communities. And I think this bill and this campaign is about making sure that we're shifting the power when it comes to energy to working class communities of color, like the ones in the Bronx and others throughout the state, and making sure that we're lifting up values that are centered on decommodifying our energy system. So there's not one that is centered on profit, one that democratizes our energy system so that we can build out towards a model of community owned, shared, renewable energy. And lastly, is just decarbonizing our energy system right now so we can move towards green energy and actually live to a Green New Deal.
Thank you for sharing, Adolfo. And, just to throw some statistics out there,
Yep.
according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, out of all the large metropolitan areas in the U.S., New York City reports the second highest utility bills. I think the first is Boston, if I'm not mistaken. Why is this, Adolfo? Can you help us break it down?
I mean, like I mentioned earlier, right? We have private utility companies, right? So they're driven on a model of profit, right? They're providing a service, but at the end of the day, they're trying to maximize, how much revenue, how much profit they can make in order to just report back to their shareholders. So we saw in 2019, and this is our data sets that according to the Public Power NYC campaign, that Con Edison won a raise to their fixed charges in their last rate case, and they made $1 billion in profit in 2019. So we've seen, Con Edison just spike in terms of the prices that they impose upon our communities and the profit that they're making, which is why they're the second highest across the United States.
And you recently actually joined Public Power NYC at the launch in front of Con Edison. Can you share more about this action and what took place?
Yeah, it was beautiful. I mean, throughout the city and throughout the state, there were multiple chapters of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America and other supporting organizations of the Public Power NYC campaign that were in multiple locations. And in the Bronx, in particular, we were there making some powerful noise and shining a light on this campaign that we were launching right now, just to get the state legislature, aka Albany, so that our state senate and our state assembly will be able to pass a series of legislations that will get to that piece of democratizing our renewable energy system, decommodifying it, and decarbonizing it. And we know that there's a lot of people who receive shut-off notices in a time right now where there's a shut-off moratorium. So we want to make sure that we're having those conversations with people on the ground about this piece of legislation. And we know that there's a lot of frustration and angst regarding to Con Edison. So that launch was about talking about those bills, and then now we're doing phone banks and knocking on doors just to make sure that folks are aware about this and are calling their state legislature.
And when we talk about the environment and how energy affects it, how will public ownership of clean, green energy systems help transform the environment here in the Bronx in particular?
For sure. I mean, it will require us investing in a modern and reliable grid that keeps the lights on for all Bronxites and all New Yorkers, especially with communities like ours who have the highest blackout rates that we've seen the last couple of years. It will censor, renewable energy and ending fossil fuel pollution in working class communities like those in the Bronx. And we know that in this borough, we are the 62, the worst county in New York State in terms of health outcomes. We have high rates of asthma, the worst air quality in the city and in the state, and our children are 8 times more likely to be hospitalized due to asthma or just negative air quality conditions in our communities compared to others upstate. So this will make sure that we meet these benchmarks by 2025, because right now, if we don't have no accountability over these private utility companies, they will have us make this shift by 2050.
Right. And now let's talk about the Public Power NYC's introduced bills, which your campaign supports. First, what does the NY Build Public Renewables Act propose? What exactly is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe, but we do in New York State have a New York Power Authority, which is a utility company here that's run by our state and mostly powers public buildings. So right now, we want to make sure that we are able to, through this piece of legislation, expand the New York Power Authority, just to make sure that we are able to get all public buildings to 100% renewable energy by 2025. It will ban energy service companies, like National Grid, like Con Edison, and allows the New York Power Authority to sell affordable renewable energy directly to all New Yorkers. Right now, if a New Yorker wants to get renewable energy, it is something that's a luxury that's afforded to those who are privileged and have the luxury to be able to pay more. And with this piece of legislation, it will allow for New York Power Authority to directly sell to New Yorkers and be able to have that. And lastly, New York, it will create union jobs throughout this process of this conversion, and will make, like I said, renewable energy available to all New Yorkers.
That second bill, Adolfo, is called the New York Utility Democracy Act. Can you share more about that bill?
Yeah, so this piece of legislation in the state again will allow for all New York's energy system to be democratically controlled by democratically elected boards. So this will allow the opportunity for real stakeholders, whether it's unions, climate experts, tenant rights organizations, or just regular New Yorkers, to have a say in terms of how the energy is used, making sure that we're meeting benchmarks, making sure that resources are put into working class communities of color, us who we've received the negative brunt of pollution, and guaranteeing that we have renewable energy that's affordable, that is owned by our communities, and that is not appointees or just private players who are driven by profit.
Right. And what stages are these bills in now? What's next for the bills to be passed?
Yeah. So right now, we're in the stage of the campaign where we are educating people in the community about what these two pieces of legislation can do, and encouraging members of the community, whether in the Bronx, Queens, or other parts of New York, to call their state representatives, their state assembly members, and their state senators, and urging them to sign on to this bill, and guaranteeing that these bills leave out of the committees that they're currently in, so that we can see these bills be voted on before the legislative session in Albany ends, which will be around June. So that's more the pressure that we're building right now, and encouraging people to call their representatives and to push the ball forward.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for sharing, Adolfo. And, I also wanted to ask if there's a model that the coalition is following. Does public power ownership currently exist somewhere else, or is that something that's completely new?
Well, I would say that I would just encourage for folks to go to ecosocialist.nyc, just to learn more about other existing models across the world. I think in New York State, this would be a prime opportunity for us to build this out. And this has been a movement that's been growing in New York State for decades. Has been growing in this country for a long time. And we look at the New York Power Authority as an example of how we can build out a perfect model that will encourage just energy that's affordable, that's owned by our communities, that serves the interests of our communities. And that way, folks could just want to learn more about the bills and learn more about existing models and what that could look like.
Right. Why was it important for you as a city council district candidate to join this fight, or this movement?
Yeah, I mean, it's important because in this district, we have the highest, it is extremely rent burden. We have, an average median income that's less than 30,000 in certain parts of the district. So we know that for a lot of people, at times it's having to make a decision between having food on the table or paying rent. And sometimes Con Edison bill is also a factor there. So we know that it's important to have accountability, making sure that our energy systems are affordable. And I'll finish off with this, right? There's people in public housing or rent stabilized buildings, so that there's times during winter when the landlord does not provide heat and hot water, and they have to buy, like a portable heater, and they use that as a way to just stay warm in their households. But then what that leads to is a higher Con Edison bill. So all of these things are connected. So we have to make sure that if we're building a vision for a homes guarantee, if we're building out a vision of renewable energy, that it has to be centered by the people. And that's why it is important for me telling my voice in this struggle.
Thank you so much, Adolfo. Before we go, how can people learn more about Public Power NYC and your campaign for city council?
Yep. So again, just to plug it in again, the ecosocialist.nyc, that is one of the best ways to learn more about Public Power NYC and to be able to join a phone bank or help table out in the street so that more people can learn about this campaign and to get them to encourage to call their state representatives. And to learn more about my campaign for city council, which the election is on June 22nd, you can go to adolfo.nyc to learn more about me and my vision for change for this community.
Thank you so much. Adolfo Abreu is a candidate for City Council D14, and he's joining us today speaking about Public Power NYC. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for our show today. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.